Today marks the beginning of a new chapter, one where we're expected to rally behind Emily and Sharon. Matthew, with a tone of triumph in his voice, made this announcement during a phone conversation. I was taken aback, struck speechless by his sudden pronouncement. It felt as though Emily and Sharon had become the sole focus of Matthew's world, and I was left on the sidelines, questioning my place in both his life and our marriage. Trying to regain some control, I forced a cheerful tone to inform him that their packages had arrived. I also mentioned, almost offhandedly, that I had moved into a new place, a statement that left Matthew momentarily silent. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm a 45-year-old sales professional at a well-established firm. My work is demanding but rewarding, and I've built strong, lasting relationships with my clients. Outside of work, life is relatively quiet. Weekends are usually spent alone at home, with Matthew being my closest family. My parents are no longer with us, and although my in-laws live nearby, we rarely interact. Matthew's frequent outings to dine with his sister, Emily, and her daughter, Sharon, have always made me uncomfortable. At first, it felt as though he preferred their company over mine, stirring a sense of resentment in me, but as time passed, I came to understand the deeper reasons behind his actions. Emily and Sharon had endured hardships, living in a rundown apartment after my father-in-law's business collapsed. Matthew's gratitude toward Emily, who helped finance his education, gave me some perspective. She had made it possible for him to finish college despite the financial struggles they faced. Once I understood the extent of their sacrifices, I softened. I stopped voicing my complaints and made peace with Matthew's desire to give back to his sister and niece. Still, the loneliness lingered. Matthew's loyalty to his family was underscored when he told me that Emily was going through a divorce and would be keeping custody of Sharon. From the start, Emily and I didn't get along. Our first meeting was brutal. She made harsh comments about my appearance and style, which left me feeling alienated. Despite this rocky relationship, recent developments have made me reflect on my role in the family. Matthew's continued focus on Emily and Sharon is something I've chosen to support, even if it's hard to ignore the isolation it sometimes brings. I want to remain understanding, especially now, when family unity is more important than ever. Matthew, however, has always chosen to overlook Emily's rude behavior toward me, forcing me to silently endure it. He recently told me that he planned to visit his parents more often, citing Emily's vulnerability and Sharon's needs as his reasons. Despite the sting of his words, I held my tongue, knowing that an argument would only push him further away. So, with a heavy heart, I said nothing and let him go. As Matthew became increasingly absent, I found myself spending more and more time alone. He rarely came home before midnight, and weekends were completely consumed by his visits to his family. The silence of our empty house became unbearable, the stillness amplifying my sense of abandonment. On the rare occasions he was home, his behavior only added to the strain. One evening, he casually suggested I buy a designer handbag for Emily as a housewarming gift, citing my upcoming bonus as the reason. I questioned the necessity of such an extravagant gift, suggesting that it should be his responsibility, not mine. His response was sharp, insisting that, as a member of the family, it was my duty to extend such courtesies. He lectured me for an hour, reminding me sternly to ensure Emily and Sharon received their gift. After he left, presumably heading to his parents' house, I quietly mulled over the years of one-sided generosity from Emily, who had never once extended such gestures toward us. A few days later, Emily's call only added fuel to the fire. She expected a gift from me, as though it was a foregone conclusion. Even though she had never shown such kindness to us, I couldn't keep my frustration in check. I reminded her of the lack of reciprocity, pointing out that we hadn't even received a wedding gift from her. Emily brushed it off, dismissing the idea of gift-giving between family members as unnecessary. She even bragged about purchasing an empty envelope for us, then complained about the quality of our wedding favors. Her sense of entitlement, combined with her utter disregard for others, left me at a loss for words. Emily's audacity at our wedding was infuriating. Her brazen attitude, combined with her complaints about the lack of more expensive gifts, left me fuming. Her final remark revealed just how little she thought of me. As if I were the lowest rung on the family ladder, someone expected to cater to her whims without question. This moment underscored the deep imbalance in our family dynamics, and I was left grappling with the harsh reality of my role, nothing more than a marital accessory, pressured to meet demands I never agreed to. I was still reeling from her audacity when Sharon jumped in, demanding that I buy her a bag from an exclusive Fifth Avenue store. She hung up with a dismissive laugh, leaving me stunned and frustrated. How had I become the target of such unreasonable demands? Why was I the one burdened with this, just because I was married to Matthew? As if to escape from their demands, I tried to shift my focus, but the situation at home was rapidly worsening. Matthew's visits became even more infrequent, and on the rare occasions he did return, I noticed he was taking money from my wallet, When I confronted him, he brushed it off, saying that since I didn't go out much, I wouldn't need it. He claimed he was using the money for something important. His disregard for both my feelings and my finances left me drained and disillusioned. Then, one day, a mover showed up at our door with boxes, saying he was there to pick up items for Matthew. Confused, I tried to explain there must have been some mistake, but the mover insisted he had orders directly from Matthew. I called Matthew, only to overhear Emily and Sharon laughing in the background. His response was nothing short of shocking. He told me that the belongings were for Emily and Sharon, and from now on, we were going to support them. He dismissed my feelings entirely, and Emily eagerly welcomed me to this new arrangement, casually suggesting that I should be happy to look after Sharon, especially since we had no children of our own. Sharon's response stung just as much. She was embarrassed at the thought of being associated with me. Matthew's unilateral decision left me in a state of shock, and the lack of consideration for my emotions made me question the foundation of our marriage. Then, Matthew made matters worse by casually mentioning that more of Emily and Sharon's things, along with new furniture, would be arriving soon. We'd need to get everything set up before their arrival, while they stayed at their parents' house, leaving me to deal with the mess alone. Emily's laughter at the thought of me handling everything by myself was the breaking point. The disrespect and lack of empathy from Matthew and his family were undeniable. I found myself wondering how much longer I could remain in a marriage where I was an afterthought, expected to support and accommodate people who showed no appreciation for my well-being. Sharon's brash demand that I handle her belongings with care pushed me to the edge, and with a sharp, "All right," I ended the call. My frustration gave way to a resolve I hadn't felt before. As soon as I hung up, I knew things had to change. 2 weeks later, Matthew called, his voice tinged with curiosity. He asked if I had sorted out the extra luggage and whether everything had been organized. With a false sweetness in my voice, I told him, yes, everything arrived, and I've moved into a new place. The shock in his silence was palpable. When the movers arrived with Emily and Sharon's things, I wasted no time. I rushed to a local real estate agency, determined to find somewhere to live. The initial process was slow, with concerns about moving in and renovations, but my persistence paid off. I found a women-only shared residence with secure entry, shared amenities, and utilities included, perfect for my needs. The place even had a cleaning service and furnished rooms, making it ideal. After viewing it, I quickly secured the last available room. I knew in that moment that I had made the right decision. The new apartment felt like freedom, a fresh start. When I told Matthew over the phone, his reaction was one of pure shock. He couldn't comprehend why I would leave. He insisted that, as a married couple, my actions were absurd and demanded I apologize and return home immediately. In the background, I could hear Emily and Sharon's panicked voices, their anger adding to the chaos of the moment. Matthew tried to regain control by threatening me with the consequences of a divorce, implying that I would struggle to find anyone else because of my age and appearance. His cruel words were meant to demean me, but instead, they only solidified my resolve. Then, with a calmness I hadn't expected from myself, I dropped the bombshell. I confronted Matthew with the knowledge of his affair, catching him completely off guard. His flustered response confirmed what I had long suspected, and I could see that he had underestimated me. Despite his betrayal and the disrespect from both him and his family, I stood my ground. I reminded them all that I was strong, independent, and that I would no longer tolerate their toxic behavior. Moving out wasn't just an escape from their demands, it was my way of reclaiming my dignity and taking control of my life. I told Matthew that I had hired a private investigator. His frequent absences had raised suspicions, and I wanted the truth. It only took 5 days for the investigator to confirm what I already knew. Matthew had been seeing his mistress regularly, after work. The dinners he claimed were with Emily and Sharon were just a cover for his rendezvous. The investigator had documented the affair with photos, capturing intimate moments between them. I couldn't help but reveal this evidence, mixing amusement with disbelief. The images spoke for themselves, and it was clear that the money Matthew had been taking from my wallet was funding his escapades. With the proof in hand, I made the decision to divorce him. I informed Matthew that I would be seeking alimony from him, and potentially from his mistress as well. I made it clear that I would be sending certified letters to both Matthew and his mistress, informing their colleagues about the affair. When I showed the evidence to a lawyer, even they were surprised by the strength of my case. Matthew's response to this was fury and disbelief. The idea of the affair becoming public at his workplace was clearly too much for him to handle. Meanwhile, Emily's anxious questioning about Matthew's well-being hinted at her own motives. She had expected to live comfortably off our efforts while she maintained her carefree lifestyle. Matthew remained silent in the face of her concerns, a silence that only highlighted the gravity of the situation he was in. He had betrayed me, and now he was at risk of losing not just our marriage, but his financial stability as well. I reminded him of the investigator's report detailing his extravagant spending on his mistress, which suggested he was accumulating debt. Emily and Sharon's outrage was loud, accusing Matthew of recklessness and expressing their contempt for his actions. Despite Matthew's pleas for help in managing the fallout with Emily and Sharon, I stood firm. I would move forward with the divorce and ensure I was compensated for the emotional distress he had caused. I made it clear that the consequences were his to face alone, especially now that the certified letters were ready to expose his affair at his workplace. Matthew's frustration was palpable, but I remained detached. I was focused on securing a fair settlement and moving on from the years of betrayal. When the call ended, I turned off my phone, blocking him from contacting me. I had made up my mind. Matthew and Emily were on their own now. The divorce became inevitable, especially when Matthew hesitated, trying to hold on to the lifestyle we had enjoyed as a dual-income couple. He realized that maintaining the same standard of living on a single income would be impossible, but armed with undeniable proof of his infidelity, I made it clear that there would be no reconciliation. I threatened legal action if he continued to resist. Eventually, Matthew agreed and signed the divorce papers. With the help of my lawyer, we worked out a fair settlement, which included alimony and compensation for emotional distress from his mistress. Surprisingly, his mistress paid her portion promptly. She had borrowed money from her parents after revealing the truth to them. Matthew, on the other hand, found the financial burden too much to bear and repeatedly requested a reduction. I firmly declined. At one point, I suggested adding the money he had taken from my wallet to the settlement, and the look on his face was priceless. In the end, he reluctantly accepted the settlement as it was. After the fallout, the affair between Matthew and his mistress became widely known, likely due to the certified documents delivered during our divorce proceedings. The mere arrival of those envelopes was enough to ignite office gossip, creating an unbearable atmosphere at work. In the end, Matthew chose to resign, unable to bear the shame and discomfort of his exposed actions. Now, Matthew finds himself struggling to secure stable employment, his age working against him. He juggles the burdens of alimony, ongoing mortgage payments, and debts accumulated from the affair by taking on temporary day labor. From time to time, he sends messages through our lawyer, filled with regret. He admits his mistakes and expresses how difficult life has become, wishing he could undo the past. Yet, despite his pleas, my path remains clear. I've moved forward, determined to rebuild my life. The pain of the past has only fueled my independence, and I'm focused on moving on. Matthew's remorse reached new heights when he broke down in front of the lawyer, tearfully lamenting how poorly he had treated me. But his realization came too late. Now, he and Emily and Sharon, who are living with him, are facing the harsh consequences of their choices. Meanwhile, I've moved on, blocking his number and cutting all ties. I have no intention of looking back. Then one day, Emily's call came through, her number unblocked by mistake. Hesitantly, I answered. She was desperate. She and Sharon were struggling to make ends meet. Utilities were being cut off, and they had little food. Her voice cracked with exhaustion, but my decision was unwavering. I had no obligation to help them out of the mess they had created. I suggested she find work, reminding her that she had the ability to support herself. Sharon's interjection took me by surprise. She accused me of being heartless, saying that I should help them since I was financially stable. Then, she demanded that I take them in. I found the request absurd. I made it clear that my divorce from Matthew meant that they were now strangers to me, and I wanted no further involvement in their lives. Sharon's anger and sense of entitlement were evident, but I stood firm. I ended the call and blocked Emily's number once more, determined to sever all ties. Their struggles, while unfortunate, were the direct result of their own decisions. I, however, had moved on, no longer burdened by their chaos. I embarked on a new chapter in my life. I had already left the shared housing, not out of necessity, but to make room for a new companion, a dog I met at an adoption event. The moment we locked eyes, it felt like fate. After several visits and a growing connection, I adopted the dog, which meant finding a pet-friendly apartment. The love and loyalty I now experience with my dog is something I had longed for in my human relationships. In my new home, filled with his unconditional affection, I no longer feel alone. Despite the obstacles life may throw my way, I face them with my loyal companion by my side. Together, we're moving forward, leaving behind the past and all its turmoil, ready for whatever comes next.